What's up, folks? Anthony Armstrong here, former NFL receiver and host of Believe in Commanders. And with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league specifically created for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. Make your way over to prizepicks.com/believe and use the code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for a first deposit match up to $100. You must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details. Pick more or pick less. It's that easy. Prize Picks.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
It wouldn't be the holiday season if there wasn't candy, right? Celebrate the holiday season with the Holiday Crush. They've sprinkled candy with a holiday theme and fun-packed challenges every week for 5 whole weeks, finishing on January 4th. The more challenges you complete, the better your chances of unwrapping delicious rewards. So, are you ready to crush the holidays? Play the Holiday Crush now. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the German football podcast from the Football Grad Network. I'm Hal Stewart. This is my voice. Welcome to it. I'm hosting in place of Bryce Dunn, and very pleased to be doing so. Thank you very much, chaps, for actually allowing me to do this. The chaps being Chris Williams. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Hal. How are you?
Yeah, good to speak to you as ever. And Manu Veth. Manu.
Hey, how's it going?
Excellent. Thank you both very much for joining me today. We've got quite a lot on the agenda to get to, so I will briefly tell you a little bit about myself for those that have never heard my voice before, and then we'll get straight to it because there is, as I say, so much to cover. But I am a radio broadcaster, been broadcasting on various different radio stations for around about 15 years, yet I'm only remembered for one error on an episode of Pointless, which is a BBC programme where I made a complete fool of myself. So there we go. That's me in a nutshell, and you can probably still find that on YouTube. Now let's get straight to the first topic. It is, of course, pre-season. We've had the World Cup. It's never too early to preview, though, the Bundesliga. In fact, it's never too early to preview anything. As anyone who listened to Manu talking about the Qatar World Cup in a previous podcast can attest to, just the 4.5 years to go on that one. By the way, I'm tipping England to win both that and the Euros. It's coming home. So, first up, we've got to talk about the German national football team, the DBF. Bit of a crisis following the fallout from the World Cup. Manu, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's never too late to look back onto something either, isn't it? Because this has been a few weeks, and it's a few weeks ago now, but at the same time, it's still very much in the headlines in Germany because of the gravity of it. We have to remember this is the first time since 1938 that a German national team did not finish in the top 8 of a World Cup. And therefore, you know, there's a lot of talk about the things that went wrong, the decisions made by the national team coach, the decisions and the things said ahead of the World Cup by the president of the DFB, as well as the sporting director, Oliver Bierhoff, right? And then, of course, the whole Erdogan and Özil affair. We actually have a statement for the first time since the Erdogan affair by Mesut Özil. Remember, Gündogan spoke about it very quickly afterwards. So right now they are in full crisis mode, and it's the fallout is quite significant because of course the way they played at this tournament. There's of course the curse that the World Cup winner always goes out in the group stage the following tournament. But I mean, Germany, we all thought would be very much beyond that. I mean, Chris, how many times did we talk about the depth of this national team? And I think when you look at the squad, and I think this is probably the most upsetting thing for most people. They look at the squad and the players that were involved in this team and they say, well, how did we not go further? with this team. I think everyone would have been happy if this would have been a team that was beyond, the Senate. That was overaged, old, sluggish, etc. But wasn't the case with this team. This team is very much still in its prime, and there's a lot of young player, a new golden generation currently in the squad as well. So people are still very much confused on how this could have happened to a side that is very talented. I mean, again, Chris, we had 53 players that could have potentially played for this team, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm starting to see maybe a little bit of arrogance, which can be the undoing of a lot of teams. So I think we talked at great length, didn't we, about the friendlies on the way up. Oh, yeah, it's just a friendly. It wasn't particularly good performance, but it's just a friendly. It'll be a lot better when they get to the tournament itself, and it wasn't. So maybe the arrogance was shown throughout that. Then you hear the stories afterwards about the DFB having to turn a Wi-Fi off in the hotel because the players were up late playing Fortnite. And other such things. So I think the whole attitude going into this tournament was obviously we're the world champions, we're going to do quite well, and I think maybe they were unprepared. And squad-wise, and I know, Hal, you and I spoke about this about 2 weeks ago. There's a lot of stuff in England about, Leroy Sané. And I think, Manu, we've spoken, and you've even wrote an article about it, that, Leroy Sané wouldn't have made a difference because Joachim Löw wouldn't have played him anyway. He took Julian Brandt, who got, 9 or 10 minutes? I think maybe a little bit longer, but it wasn't much longer than that over the 3 games. So we would have been talking about Leroy Sané not getting enough time. So I think it's the fact that maybe the setup he went with, the tactics were so different from the Confederations Cup last year, where Germany played exceptionally well. And I think it was just it was a complete mess from top to bottom, wasn't it?
Yeah, you point out a couple of things here that I want to touch on because, I was at the World Cup. I was at the tournament and I followed the German national team. As long as they were in the tournament, we all expected, of course, that would be a lot longer. And speaking to people that were even longer with the team, and this is at the training camp, what really became apparent is that there almost was a rift between the two teams. And that was the 2017 Confederations Cup team that won the tournament, basically a walkthrough, right? And what was essentially a B team split into 2 teams, because remember the U21 also won the tournament last summer, right? So you had those players, and then you had the players that won the 2014 World Cup. And the two apparently did not get along very well, or were not integrated very well, which is on Joachim Löw. And I'll get to him in a moment. So it's a setup that reminds me very much of what happened in 1994 when Germany crashed out in the quarterfinal of the 1994 World Cup in the United States, losing to Bulgaria 2-1. I mean, this is up until this World Cup was the greatest shame of any German national team. And back then we of course had the issue that we had the 1990 team that won the World Cup, and we had the privilege that the Germany was reunified. So there was a great East German national team as well that had to be integrated. And that integration went very poorly as well. And it almost seems to be a repeat of those mistakes made back then. And then you add arrogance, which is, I think it's great that you bring that up, Chris, because there was a definite aloofness of Joachim Löw. I was in Sochi when he was hanging out on the beach promenade, getting pictures taken of himself because he finally got his wish of being in Sochi and training his team there. And it's really interesting that you say that because there was almost like this aloofness by the national team coach that he sort of said, okay, well, I don't really have to coach this team. This is a great setup. We're just going to do the same thing that we did at the 2014 World Cup, completely ignoring all the issues that were going on below him, with players not getting along, with young players thinking like, look, we are the future. We have won the most recent tournaments. We should be playing more. And they're probably right. And on top of that, him trying to integrate them in a setup, this 4-2-3-1, which hasn't been used by the national team in a tournament since 2016, and is, for my opinion, is an outdated setup. Trying to force players that he played with in the setup last year into this old setup, and it just didn't work. And then maybe Chris, this is one for you, and I think you're gonna get one laugh out of this. The staff was 181 people at this World Cup. The German national team took 181 people to this tournament to take care of everything from scouting to training, etc. And Joachim Löw wasn't even involved into day-to-day decisions anymore. That's for me, big symptom of what went wrong at this World Cup.
181 people. Wow, that's a lot. Now, Hal, we watched a game. I think it was a Portugal game over lunch one afternoon. You watched every single game at the World Cup. What did you make of Germany?
Well, the talk in the UK was obviously Leroy Sané must go, but actually I was a huge fan of Lars Stindl, not just during Germany's previous success. You mentioned the Confederations Cup, but when I actually lived in Germany, I watched Hannover 96 when Lars Stindl was up and coming, more of a midfielder there. He's sort of become a bit more advanced, and there was no talk about Lars. Am I wrong in thinking that he could have added something? I know that the problems here are far greater than just one player, although try telling the British media that it was all about Leroy Sané. But hey, that's just one that I thought I'd throw out there.
Yeah, it's a good one to mention. He was, of course, hurt, so that's why he didn't make the squad. But you're onto something, Hal, because when I watched Germany in the stadium, and this gets me back to the formation 4-2-3-1, the big issue I had was that Werner played a single striker, and Werner likes to drift out left, right? Because he usually plays at Leipzig, he plays with Paulsen, big center forward, who can hold the ball for him and allows him to drift out wide, right? Because then he can drift back in, and there will be someone to give him the ball and he can execute. At the Confederations Cup, that striker would have been Stindl, who does something very similar because he drifts out and back and forth between midfield and attack, right? He's very much a center player. He is not someone who goes out wide. So that's definitely something that was missing. And another player, who Werner did really well with was Sandro Wagner. And of course, maybe of the controversies of the players that were not taken, we should probably be talking more about him rather than Leroy Sané, because I think if you play Werner as a striker, you need someone to partner him with. And I think that Wagner would have probably been a better fit than any of the players Löw used at the tournament.
That would have been interesting. I think you might as well bring Carsten Janker.
It is going to be interesting because he's now ruled himself out, hasn't he? He had he threw his teddy out the cot and said he's never going to play for Germany again. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what he said. But remember the Confed Cup, he was part of the setup that won the tournament. So I think, and I watched that partnership. I very much believe that Werner needs a partner when he plays up front. He's not a single striker. He can't play in a 4-2-3-1 simply because if he plays, he leaves too much room in the box. And then there's no one there to execute or give him the room to go or drift back into the penalty area. So I think that was definitely one of the things that I've noticed sitting in the stadium. In the stadium, it's really nice because where the press boxes are and where the press boxes were in Russia, you were really high up. So you got a really nice sweeping view of the playing field. So you'd notice things that sometimes you miss on television. And I thought that was really something that struck me. It's like, why is he out left and who is in the box? So of course, Germany had 70% ball possession on average and played all these wonderful attacking moves, but it was never a real good finish. And I think that is something that they need to look at. And I'm not saying bring back Sandro Wagner. I think that's a thing of the past, but they will have to find a formation that suits someone like Timo Werner better and maybe find him a partner that can play with him.
Well, Manu, maybe it's not about the players. You've probably heard that Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, the Bayern Munich chairman, never one to be quiet, said that Philipp Lahm could give the DFB the leadership that it lacks, saying at the moment it is run by amateurs. And I wondered what you thought about possibility of Lahm being involved. Probably not going to replace Love because he's got a good contract. He's unlikely now his stock has gone down rather than up to get the kind of job at club level that certainly he would have wanted and would have been offered before the World Cup. But do you see a place for Lahm?
Yeah, first of all, I don't often agree with Rummenigge, but I agree with him on that. It's been run like amateurs. Look, Lahm is an interesting personality, but I don't know if he has the experience to do the job right away. But that said, one of the positions that I would like, there's two people I would like to see it go. And these are very strong statements. And that's Grindel on top, the president, simply because of his party connections and the way he handled the whole Mesut Özil affair. And I think we're going to talk about that very quickly, right? And Oliver Bierhoff for the choosing of the national team headquarters in Moscow, the Vatutinki, the famous Vatutinki national team headquarters at the World Cup. And of course, his failure to see what was going on with the team. You know, a sporting director is very much in charge of realigning the national team coach as well. So he should have seen the things that were going on between Löw and the squad. He also oversaw the, I don't even know the right word of it. What do we call this? Like implosion of members of staff, the amount of people taken to the World Cup. I think that's definitely the two changes I would like to see. Löw, unfortunately, is without an alternative. The only national team coach that I could see doing better than him right away would be Jürgen Klopp, and Chris can probably say right away, no, that's not going to happen anytime soon. But that's, you know, there's no alternative to Löw. So you have to change to people around him to give him a different setup and people that demand more from him, because we know he's a great coach. But I think there was that weird aloofness about him. He thought it would just happen by itself. So you need people that will demand more from him. And I think you may have to change a bunch of positions around him. And I would start at the very top.
Love is the answer.
Well, there is no different answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Mesut Özil. We should probably talk about the fact that he had this meeting with the Turkish president, Erdogan, and he's released a couple of statements actually following this. For those that don't really understand what's gone on here, I mean, I might be first to put my hand up there and say I don't really see why the fallout from this has been so dramatic. So what did he say? What's happened?
Yeah, he spoke today, and he spoke of double standards and right-wing propaganda, and I think he's not quite wrong with that. I think that this situation was handled very poorly. Now, I don't want to condone his meeting with Erdogan. I think there's something very questionable about it, but at the same time, he is of Turkish descent. What his political views are his own. And I think people will have to just understand that not everyone is into liberal democracy all the time. I mean, Germany is a liberal democracy, which allows people to have political views. That's, I think, the number one thing. And that includes people that includes all German citizens, even if they are from a multicultural background. Look, I'm a dual citizen myself. I understand that sometimes loyalties are a little bit split. And, I think people have to just realize that, okay, look, we have a sizable minority of Turks living in Germany. And for the most part, you know, they have done really good things for Germany as a country. They have, I mean, Chris, we spend a lot of time in Berlin. You know, the multiculturalism in Berlin is one of its greatest assets. It certainly is. So, you know, look, we then also have part of multiculturalism is also tolerance. And I think that is something that we did not give to Mesut Özil. And the DFB really, in my opinion, failed to properly address this issue. Because first they said, okay, this is not an issue. Obviously it was. Some people were upset. So these people should have been given an explanation and a proper statement of why Germany as a multicultural place has room for all sorts of political views. And that while we don't condone Özil meeting Erdogan, we understand it. Boom. That would have solved all the problems. But they just said, okay, well, we just sent Özil and Gündogan to meet with President Steinmeier, so therefore it's not a problem anymore. Obviously, the fans didn't think that was quite enough, right? And then after the World Cup was over, Bierhoff said, oh, maybe we shouldn't have nominated Özil. You know, he throws him under the bus basically after the tournament is over and makes him a scapegoat. That is just as wrong as not issuing a statement ahead of the tournament, right? So I think Özil is quite right at being very upset, because when you look at the press and the way the whole thing was handled, he's quite right at saying this was in a lot of ways used for right-wing propaganda. We have to remember the president of the DFB is in the CDU, the center-right party. So I think he has a lot of reasons to be really upset about this. And I hope that he continues his career, because Mesut Özil is a fantastic player and he can give a lot to this national team. And we have to remember he's played 97 games for Germany. He's a player that could reach 100 caps very soon. And no national team player that has given so much to our national team, no matter what his background, no matter what he's done, deserves it was given. throughout the tournament, after the tournament. And I think the DFB should have done a lot better to handle the whole situation.
Yeah, I think you've surmised that absolutely right, and I think you're correct in your assumption that if they had come out initially with those responses, that it would have not killed it completely, but certainly the fallout would have died down a lot quicker. The International Champions Cup has been interesting. I think for a lot of fans over stateside, they enjoyed the World Cup, although some of the coverage, particularly on Fox, has received some criticism. So they were hungry for football. There's actually been two big teams facing off in America. The ICC has nothing to do with cricket. It is, as I say, the International Champions Cup. Why is it important for the Bundesliga as well to be present there?
Well, the Bundesliga's, I mean, Manny, you'll know that they've been trying to crack America for the past few years, and they're seeming to do it. Now, I know you're quite right, Hal. Fox got a hammering on social media for their coverage of the World Cup. Obviously, I was in the UK, and we had BBC and ITV, and BBC Radio 5 Live, which I thought as a trio gave fantastic coverage. So I think we were in a lucky place. But Fox does carry every single Bundesliga game live throughout the season, and they've got a brilliant combination of guys who we know well on the show, Keith Costigan and Ian Joy, who do a lot of games, and they covered it fantastically well. So I think it's good that the Bundesliga guys are back in. Obviously, Dortmund and Bayern. Bayern have played one game outside of the States. They're also going to be playing inside of the States. But it's ever present. But it's the guys who have been there. I don't think I've seen Christian Pulisic over social media as much as I have in the past 24 hours, Manu. I don't know if you've seen as much as I have. He seems to be everywhere, doing interviews with everyone, and obviously he's a poster boy for the Bundesliga in North America.
Yeah, Pulisic, and there was even a picture of LeBron James, who's of course a massive figure in North America, you know, the basketball player, for those who don't follow basketball, but I think everyone knows LeBron James, wearing a Pulisic Dortmund shirt. So, you know, this is very big. To come over here to North America is very significant. And yeah, you mentioned the Fox World Cup coverage. I think it would help just to leave the hotel every once in a while, to get a better coverage, of the tournament and the people around you, because their coverage was atrocious, and they got a lot of hammering for it, not just from people watching it, but from other journalists being at the tournament. And I think this could help. The Bundesliga is their bread and butter at Fox, and I think they really need to look at how they cover it. And I think the ICC does a very good job over here when it comes. I mean, these are just glorified friendlies, to be quite frank, and yet they get a lot of attention. So for me, I'm very excited to see these teams come over here, because they play friendlies in front of, I think, Liverpool and Manchester United are scheduled to play in front of 120,000 people in Michigan, right? So these ICC games get a lot of attention. So the Bundesliga needs to be here. The two big teams, Bayern and Dortmund, need to be here. And it's a great tournament for that. And it's a great tournament for Americans, because they get to see players and teams that they usually only see on television.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched Borussia Dortmund play against Manchester City on Friday in Chicago. Of course, the interest from a British point of view, Jadon Sanchez, who left Manchester City and then was playing against his old side. I'm not sure Pep Guardiola will have taken too much from his performance to say I made a huge error there, although he did play extremely well and set up a few chances. But it's really hard, as you mentioned, Manny. These are glorified friendlies. It's hard to take too much from these and know how much stock to place in individual players' performances. I mean, Chris, I know you of course have an interest in Dortmund. Your thoughts from the first test under new coach Lucien Favre?
Well, yeah, what can really you take from friendlies? They played a younger Manchester City side. I thought it was a good opening. I thought really what we can take from this, and I know it's only one game in pre-season, I thought Dahoud was excellent, which he hasn't been for, I'll say, since he left Gladbach. So that's a good one for Dortmund to start firing on for the start of this season. I think, though, we will see the next couple of games how they are really going to deal with the coming season. The one against Liverpool will be, although it's a pre-season friendly, will be very interesting from a Dortmund side, because Liverpool will play a very high press, as we know. So it'll be interesting to see how Dortmund counter that. And it'll be really interesting, and Manu, you'll know this more better than anyone, I think, because Lucien Favre plays a very distinctive style of football where He won't just allow shots from anywhere. There's certain areas where he prefers shots to be taken from because there's more chance of it going in. He's a bit of an XG maestro, and also he's quite happy to give teams the ball in certain areas. And we will probably see this, I would say, tonight in a game against Liverpool, which will be very interesting. But I'm looking forward to see the shape that they play in, because when he was back in the Bundesliga previously, he had some very, very good football, and that's what I'm mostly looking forward to see. Can he take Dortmund back to a level where they were maybe 2 years ago, especially under Thomas Tuchel, who obviously has moved on to PSG now?
Yeah, Chris, I'm glad you bring that up, because I actually tried to look out for this a little bit during the Manchester City game. You could see, especially when Dahoud and Sancho were on, that they were looking more for the danger areas. Instead of taking the shot right away, they would play an extra pass and try to get really deep into the penalty box. And I thought at times they did that quite well, looking for the danger areas and the areas where the scoring probabilities are quite high. And I think with Sancho and Dahoud, Dahoud played for Favre, right, at Gladbach. I think they have the right players for this, and we have to mention it, don't we? That trick that Dahoud did on that poor Manchester City defender. Just unbelievable. Just a little flick and then right through the legs. Very, very nice, fancy footwork. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Dortmund will do with this tournament, but now, of course, with the players that they're slowly feeding into the squad.
Yeah, they've brought in quite a few. Dortmund have signed Delaney, Marius Wolf, Diallo, Hakimi, who we saw at the World Cup, Hitz as well, the goalkeeper, very interesting fellow, the former Augsburg keeper, who, Manu, I'm sure you remember this, when he scuffed up the penalty spot when playing Cologne and Anthony Modeste. Remember him? Henny's the GOAT certainly does. Modeste, he missed the ensuing penalty, and Hitz was actually fined, I think it was a few €100. He also scored against Bayer Leverkusen. Let's remember, this is a goalkeeper. But Bayer Leverkusen themselves, no strangers to seeing goal-scoring keepers. Younger listeners will remember reading about Hans-Jörg, but we remember watching him take penalties. So this is a keeper that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on. And I think the way you've described Borussia Dortmund, both of you, they are going to be the neutrals team to watch. But still, no new striker. What is the latest on Dortmund's striker search? And do they actually need to sign a new striker? They've been linked to a few. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I think they do need a striker because, Aubameyang has moved on. Manu and I were very lucky to see him in the flesh. I've seen him in the flesh a couple of times, and what he brings or what he brought to that side, especially under Tuchel, was something frightening, which they didn't seem to replace. Yarmolenko came in, and although I thought he had a very good game at Wembley when he played against Spurs, scored a cracking goal. We were there covering that for footballstart.com. He really sort of faded out after that, and then he didn't really get a chance once Bosch had left. So for me, there's still a striker, there's still an Aubameyang-sized hole that needs to be filled for me. And it's going to be interesting where they get it from, because in order to, Aubameyang was scoring about 25 plus goals, scored 31 the other season. I think they're going to have to spend a lot of money to replace that. Don't forget, Klopp sort of fell into that position with him to, bring him from outside in, and he flew with it. So it's going to be really interesting whether they can find a striker. Who could they bring in at the moment? And that's the problem. It's not just who they're going to bring in, it's will they spend the money. I don't think they've spent as much of the Dembele money as they should have done to bring in to bolster the squad. So for me, they still need to splash, and I don't know if they're going to do it, 25, 30 million euros on a striker. But Manu, you'll know, Maximilian Philipp, I've got a lot of time for, and maybe he's going to get a shot at that.
Yeah, and you have to remember too the way Lucien Favre plays. What he did at Gladbach, for example, he played with 2 false nines, right? He converted Stindl to a striker, and Raphael as well, and both of them were not strikers. So he may very well go down the route and say, look, we have so many attacking midfielders. We're just going to turn two of them into strikers and make us less dependent on a single striker. But at the same time, I'm with you, Chris. I think Dortmund need to sign a striker. I think the game is changing. We saw at the World Cup the importance of a striker, even if he just stands around in the penalty box, like Giroud, for example, right? Who didn't record a single shot on goal throughout the entire tournament and still helped France win the World Cup. So sometimes you just need the presence in the box. And I think that the rumor that I liked, and it's a rumor that I like a lot because over on footballgrad.com, one of the teams that we closely covered throughout the World Cup was Croatia and Mario Mandzukic. I thought throughout the tournament, why did Bayern sell him? I still think that when you look at the time Mandzukic spent at Bayern, they won the Champions League title with Mandzukic, and then they sold him after Lewandowski came in, and Lewandowski gives you 30 goals a season, but Mandzukic gives you 15 to 20 goals that actually matter, right? And that includes against really big sides. And I think that he is a sort of a character forward. So I was delighted to hear that Dortmund were actually looking and bringing him in. I realize he's 32 now, but when you saw him play at the World Cup, the minutes that he put in, remember by going into the final, they played 90 minutes more than France did because of these 3 extra times, and he still looked fresh and scored a goal. Unfortunately, he also scored an own goal, yes. So he actually managed to score 2 goals in the World Cup final. But for me, he's a character player, and he's a player that could bring leadership to the side. And he's also someone with a very strong winning mentality. That look that he had in his eyes ahead of the semi-final against England, the stare of death. There was people shuddering around me in the press box. When I was sitting in the press box and the monitor focused in on Mandzukic, and there was almost like an ooh and ah, like when English journalists saw that, because he just has that winning mentality. And I think if Dortmund have a chance, and they're monitoring the situation quite closely from what I hear, they have the chance to land him. I think that'd be a fabulous signing.
It would be a fabulous signing. He, of course, landed on a photographer after scoring against England. He's actually a big presence, as that photographer will know, and he would be a good fit. Don't ask Nikola Kalinic about having a finalists medal, which Mandzukic, of course, does, and the rest of the Croatian team, and well deserved. You were right to follow them so closely on the website. There's also a rumour that Dortmund will sign a new midfielder as well, Axel Witsel. What do we say? Is that going to happen?
It wouldn't be the holiday season if there wasn't candy, right? Celebrate the holiday season with the Holiday Crush. They've sprinkled candy with a holiday theme and fun-packed challenges every week for 5 whole weeks, finishing on January 4th. The more challenges you complete, the better your chances of unwrapping delicious rewards. So, are you ready to crush the holidays? Play the Holiday Crush now. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.
It's Funke Sport is the source, and they usually don't speculate. So there must be something to it. He plays in China. He played at Benfica and then at Zenit, where he was quite a big presence in Russia. Witsel is a very good player. I mean, this Belgium side was very good at the World Cup, but Witsel is a very good player, and he's a very strong presence in midfield. And that's an area that we discussed many times, right? Dortmund needs someone who puts in a tackle at the right moment, someone who just has a little bit of steel to him. That's something that we identified quite a lot, and I think Witsel can maybe bring that to the side.
Yeah, they will need that. We saw it at times last season, and it was missing. Certainly, was missing from when Klopp and Tuchel were in charge. Was that ability to stop the opposition attack high up the field, or to be able to transition it quickly from your end of the field, and that's something they've been missing in midfield for a while. I think probably since Jongden went missing. But for Mandzukic, just looking at his stats, he's actually got the lowest minutes per goal is when he's been in Germany, 150 minutes per goal in the Bundesliga compared to 312 in Serie A and 162 in La Liga. He also gets a goal every 137 minutes when he played in a DFB Pokal. So I think we could say he's suited to German football.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to say. And we will, of course, now touch on Bayern Munich. We mentioned that they are going to be going to the United States because they beat Paris Saint-Germain in their first ICC match. That was in Austria, a score of 3-1. It was all about turning it on in the second half. They will then head to the US. So what have we learnt, Manu, from the first pre-season match? Of course, under their new head coach, Kovac, someone we mentioned Croatia, of course, played very well for them, and someone that I'm sure you and I both enjoyed watching when he was a player.
Yeah, I was watching this really closely because we all expect a paradigm shift at Bayern, right? Away from 4-2-3-1 and possession football and passing the ball around needlessly around opposition's penalty boxes to a more direct play. And it was really interesting watching, I guess, what was their first serious friendly match against another top side in PSG. And I saw a lot of Pep Guardiola still in this game. A lot of passing, a lot of possession, a lot of slow passing. Sort of the same things that I've been criticizing about the national team as well. The Bayern still seems sluggish. So I think the one thing that I'll take away, especially from the first 45 minutes, is Kovac still has a lot of work to do. And the first 45 minutes were very, negative if you're a Bayern fan. And they were, of course, down 1-0. The second half, I thought, was a lot better. I thought that the shape slowly changed. He's probably given them a halftime talk and said, look, I'm not Pep Guardiola. I don't need 95% of ball possession. I just want goals. And the second half, they played a lot more direct. And I think the one thing that I really like from this particular game is the way Renato Sanchez played. Here's a player that Bayern spent a lot of money for and haven't gotten anything from him because the way he was integrated first under Ancelotti was a complete failure, and then Ancelotti sent him to his former assistant to Swansea. And Chris, maybe you can talk a little bit more what happened at Swansea because you follow the Premier League a lot closer than I do, but it was a complete disaster, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, to keep it very, very short, he went and joined a side which were horrendous and made a couple of bad errors himself, and then he was kicked to the curb. So I think maybe he was thrown under a bus really by Ancelotti by sending him to Swansea because it was never the right fit for him. He should have gone. And I don't quite know if he was ready for a top 6 side, but he certainly could have gone to a top 10 or top 12 Premier League side not gone to Swansea and just been a square peg in a round hole. And it's interesting to see him come back because Niko Kovac has spoken to press and said he's willing to give him a second chance, and I think he could be reinvigorated under Kovac because he's trying to change the team and trying to maybe phase out is the wrong word, but he's going to have to change the way Bayern play and the way they've set up, and to bring Sanchez back and give him that chance. It could be a blessing in disguise, and it'll certainly save Bayern a lot of money because I don't think they'll potentially get back what they bought him for.
Yeah, he is a player. I mean, let's not forget that what he's done previously, particularly at the Euros with Portugal, the man clearly has ability. And I think, personally, just from a neutral point of view, it'd be fabulous to see him actually perform at the level we know he can again. And we'll get a chance to see if he's actually going to start the Bundesliga, set to return on Friday, the 24th of August. And the first fixture will be played between those defending champions we're talking about, Bayern Munich and Hoffenheim. So it doesn't get easier for Niko Kovac as manager. It'll be a really fascinating opening tussle. But some big questions still ahead, for Bayern. Frank Ribery, who people tell me I look like, and I don't like that, and Arjen Robben, both getting older. Manu, do they actually still feature?
Yeah, well, first I have to address the elephant in the room. You look like Frank Ribery.
I mean, that's what they call me, the elephant in the room.
Hal, you need to send over a picture.
I don't think I do.
It's very harsh. He doesn't look like Frank Ribery.
Thank you. Bless you, Chris.
So sorry, I have to recover from this for just 1 second.
Well, do they feature? Of course, we're talking about Renato Sanchez, the future. Frank Ribery and Arjen Robben, very much the past, some would say, and it's the harsh world of football, but it's reality. They are getting older. Do they still feature in Niko Kovac's plans this season and going forward?
Well, I think they've been both told in quite strict terms that, look, you're not going to play as prominent a role as you have in the past when they renewed their contracts because you're 34 and 35. And when you look at the numbers, when you look at the actual statistics, and I'm talking about sprints and distance covered, both of them had a significant drop last year. And I think that's a sign that maybe for them, I think they're going to be phased out slowly. And also you have to remember Kovac is going to change the shape of this Bayern squad quite significantly. I think he's going to make away with 4-2-3-1 and he's going to 3-5-2. Remember they are very strongly linked to signing Benjamin Pavard from Stuttgart. Word is that a deal is actually already agreed for next summer, and they're currently trying to get him maybe to come as early as this summer over. So another center back for them to have enough center backs to play with three in the back, right? And Pavard is, of course, one of the revelations of the World Cup. Of course, Chris and I, we watched him all last season. We know how good of a player he was before the World Cup, but I mean, he showed at the World Cup how great of a player he can be. He's still very young, so they want to really get him in. And so you will see a change of shape. And in 3-5-2, Robben's and Ribéry's role is going to change significantly as well. Because in that formation, with five in midfield, someone like Sanchez will be a lot better suited than either Ribéry, right? So I think as that change of shape, that change of philosophy will take a good part of the season, I think. And so as the team was slowly more from 4-2-3-1 to 3-5-2, you will see a lot less of Frank Ribéry and Arjen Robben in the starting 11. That's my theory anyways, and I think it makes sense. I mean, they have to change the way they play. Just because one of the things we saw at the World Cup is that quick transition game is much more important now, and that the 4-2-3-1 and the possession game is something that's sort of slowly but surely being, weaned out of world football.
Yeah, and as any players get older in any successful team, there is always that new crop that must come through. And with the national team of Germany all having pretty much to a man a bad World Cup, will that actually affect Bayern, who have so many players that represented Germany in Russia?
Yeah, Chris, this is something that you brought up, so I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this first.
Well, yeah, so I had I think after Germany went out, and just off the top of my head thought, has, Bayern's dominance of the past 5-6 years, has it sort of stifled German football? And going through, if you take it back to after the last World Cup was won, German football was on a real big high. There was the old German Champions League final. Everybody was talking about German football. And then the league, it fractured and it split a bit. There was Bayern, and then there's a league without Bayern, and you take Bayern out, and you've got one of the closest leagues in Europe, and probably in the world. You throw Bayern in, and it's an annual procession at the moment, a procession where they have won the league. Are they going to win it by March this year, or is it going to be by April, or are we going to see something develop into early May? And the problem we've had is that the Bayern players didn't cover themselves in glory in the World Cup. And I think that comes from them not having a challenge week in, week out. There's certain teams who step up when they play Bayern. So I think we can look around Dortmund, Hoffenheim, Leipzig, definitely in the last couple of seasons have tried to take it to Bayern. Manuel, we were in the stadium for that fantastic 5-4 game that blew us away that day. So there are teams that will take a challenge to Bayern, but most teams are scared of them. You just look at Hamburg, who rolled over yearly for Bayern, and they would just look at the fixtures and write those 2 games off. And I think a lot of teams have done that, and that's given Bayern the ability to just go out and win. And if Bayern are beaten these days, sometimes we end up talking about why were Bayern beaten. Is it because Bayern had an off day? It's never about how good the other team was. It's always about, oh yeah, but they were beaten. I mean, I think if we look at the last Pokal, Manu, I think is the first time I've really seen Bayern beaten properly. But once again, we were talking again after that, how poor they were rather than how well Eintracht Frankfurt played, which they played fantastically well. So I think that's bred a whole situation around Bayern, which has developed into the national side. So it's going to be interesting to see how Kovac deals with that, because I think quite a lot of Bayern players go onto the pitch and knowing they're going to win. Now, whether that comes through hard play or whether it comes through a contentious decision late on, and think about when I was back in Stuttgart last season before the winter break, there's some contentious goals there and there's a contentious penalty, etc. So, it's a tough one, but I think now Bayern this season we could see a very different side than we've seen the past 6. And I'm hoping, I really do hope, that come the winter break, we're looking at maybe Bayern being 3rd or 4th. And I don't say that because I'm anti-Bayern. I say that because I want the league to be strong. And I think it would really help the league this year after Germany's fall out of the World Cup, is if everybody's talking about a new winner of the league now, be that Dortmund again, be it Leipzig, which I know would rattle a lot of people throughout Germany. I think that might be good to rattle a few people, or someone like Hoffenheim.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating. Or Hanover 96. Let's just throw them in there as well. Hey, Bobby Wood, it could happen. You mentioned, of course, it really does for Bobby. He's gone there on loan. So you mentioned, of course, the Pokal final. Eintracht Frankfurt then were managed by Niko Kovac, worth mentioning. Jerome Boateng could be leaving the club for the club that they just beat in that ICC friendly, Paris Saint-Germain. Apparently, Manu, am I right reading that he's fallen out with Mats Hummels, his national team centre-back partner?
That's been the word. Yeah, there has been disagreements that actually go back to that cup final, because apparently there was already a lot of discontent in the Bayern squad that then carried over to the national team. So yeah, Mats Hummels and Jerome Boateng weren't on great talking terms throughout the World Cup, which would have, of course, explained why they were so disjointed in the back at times at the World Cup, and then of course also disjointed for some games for Bayern. And it's interesting. The word is that there is a chance that Boateng could be leaving. Boateng, of course, has now for a couple of seasons already made noise about wanting to leave, and Tuchel is apparently very interested in bringing him over to PSG. So that is a good chance that could happen.
Yeah, but do you actually need to like the player that you play alongside? Of course, famously, Andy Cole and Teddy Sheringham couldn't stand each other, yet, it still worked.
Well, you should be professional enough for it not to be a problem. But I guess when there's a general discontent in the squad, I mean, this was one of many issues we're talking about, right? And at Bayern and, of course, the national team. I think it adds, maybe to add to the comments I made earlier about Germany, it wasn't one thing that went wrong. It was lots of little things that add to one big problem. And I think that's the same thing. It's just one little thing that adds to a big problem. So
let's be honest. The biggest talking point next season is going to be managers pulling their hair out at players playing Fortnite.
Yeah.
That's going to be it. That's going to be the talking point right throughout the season. Actually, one of the talking points for right now, we need to talk about this Canadian wunderkid, Alphonso Davies. Manu, you get to watch him because where else would you live but Canada? So are you living in Vancouver? Is that right? You can watch him play for his team, the Whitecaps.
I live in Victoria, but I do cover the Whitecaps because Vancouver isn't far. And I write on the Whitecaps for Pro Soccer USA, so I want to give them a shout out right there. I'm their Vancouver correspondent, so I do get to see a lot of Alphonso Davies, and a lot of people back in Germany are asking, who is this kid? And I can say with quite great confidence, he's a fantastic player. He debuted in Major League Soccer when he was 15. And yes, we all have the first memory of the first wunderkid in Major League Soccer of Freddie Adu. Yeah, I have to address the elephant in the room. But Major League Soccer has changed a lot since Freddie Adu. I mean, this is 10 years ago. This is over 10 years ago. Major League Soccer is a very different league today than it was then. It's a league that has grown quite significantly and making great strides towards becoming a more professional league and going away from being a league that's for retirement footballers rather than, trying to become rather a league for bringing in young Central Americans who are trying to make a name for themselves. And Vancouver is one of those clubs. They sign predominantly players from Latin America, young players that want to make the next step in their careers and want to play in a more professional environment. Because when it comes to stadium infrastructure, training, MLS is one of the best in the world because that's what North Americans do, right? They try to really put a perfect framework around everything that they do. So Vancouver have a huge academy system. They have around 2,000 academies spread all across this country. And one of the players that they discovered was Alphonso Davies, who is a refugee from Liberia, and he's now a Canadian citizen. and has played in MLS for 3-4 years. And this is the year he's now 17 and he's put on a lot of muscle mass ahead of this season. He's grown quite a lot too. And he's finally being able to marry his huge technical abilities, because technically he's always been 2 or 3 steps ahead of everyone in this league, to actually being able to do it because he has the physical strength to go past the player now. And he scored 3 goals, 6 assists this season, which again for a 17-year-old is very good. And he's not playing at the best team right now. Vancouver is struggling this year. So he's been the only shining light there. And this is a player that Christoph Biermann in his book Match Plan, he went to one of the statistic groups where they track youth players and look at the numbers. And this is a player that had similar numbers than Cristiano Ronaldo at the same age. So this is a real talent. Yes, he's not playing in the most prominent league on the planet, but this is a talent that whoever will get him, and it looks like it's going to be Bayern, is going to get maybe one of the most prominent talents in world football at the moment. But you still need to sell to Bundesliga fans, look, we're spending possibly 15 million euros on a guy from Major League Soccer. That's the bottom line, right? This is what I try to explain to other Vancouver Whitecaps journalists and people that cover the team on a regular basis. Like, well, we have the greatest talent. It's like, yeah, but try to explain to journalists and experts back in Germany who do not read Christoph Biermann's Match Plan that you're just spending 15 million euros on a kid from Canada that no one ever heard of.
Yeah, but like you say, he has enjoyed, I'm just reading here, a breakout. Last year, Gold Cup with his national team. He scored 3 goals, won the Golden Boot, best young player, team of the tournament that he was part of, a full Canadian international. Incredible. By the way, we were talking about Freddie Adu. Chris, you might remember this. Do you remember the young player who's now not so young? He's 43. But when he first burst onto the scene, a Ghanaian footballer by the name of Nee Lamptey, who was described for many years as the next Pele. I'm just always so conscious of when we hype up young players.
Pele. I think the only thing that's worse than the next Pele is the Iranian Messi or the Greek Maradona. That's the worst one. Oh yeah, he's the Liberian Ronaldo. That's brilliant.
It's true. There was a lot of that, of course, during the World Cup, and none of them actually. No, maybe all of them lived up to the Messi of the World Cup, but certainly not the Messi and Ronaldo that we love and adore so much on a week-to-week basis. Now, we talk about players to watch, exciting transfers. There's one maybe a couple I want to throw at you. Mainz have pulled off a bit of a coup by bringing in Jean-Philippe Mateta from Olympique Lyon. This is a 4-year deal, and he's a striker. And for those that don't know, he was on loan at Le Havre in the 2nd division last season, scored 17 goals. So I think Mainz have made a really intelligent signing with Mateta, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's going to be one that I want to keep an eye on. I'm also excited by Werder Bremen's signing of Josh Sargent, the USA striker. Now, he's the name a lot more people will know about because he scored in his debut for both club and country. So, Manu, you can probably tell us a little bit more about Josh Sargent and how excited Werder fans should be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of excitement about him in stateside. And I'm glad you're actually bringing that up because the issue that Alphonso Davies will face if he signs for Bayern today, right? He's a non-EU citizen, so he wasn't able to play last year because they can't play until they're 18. And this is, I need to add this to the Davies story. He's not turning 18 until November, so he wouldn't be able to play in any competitive fixture for Bayern until November. And Sargent is finally 18, so we'll see a lot of him, I think, at Werder Bremen this year because I think they really put in the gamble to say, okay, like, look, we're going to sign you now, and yes, it's unfortunate you won't be able to play for half a year. But from what you hear from Bremen, they're really excited. And I think when we look at Weston McKennie at Schalke last year, they threw him right in and he played a lot of minutes at Schalke. I think Werder Bremen will do the exact same thing with Sargent. They're going to give him a lot of minutes. And again, the Major League Soccer is changing. The academy systems here are changing significantly. They're producing a lot of young, good players, and Sargent is one of them.
Yeah, it could be the next Bobby Wood. Just
well, hopefully not for him because
I have still got a lot of hope for Bobby.
Score a screaming goal on his debut.
I want to add to Bobby Wood. He's not an MLS product though. He's an 1860 product. They brought him over to Munich at a very young age, so we can't put this one on MLS. We can blame 1860. But
I'm really pleased, of course, that you, like me, actually, I love the MLS. I know it gets a lot of stick, but I spent quite a bit of time in Seattle, and one of the players there, DeAndre Yedlin, came through the youth system and was someone I had the pleasure of watching live on many occasions, and I was so pleased to see him actually succeed in Europe, and I really hope it's, of course, the same story for Alphonso Davies. From what you're telling me about him, the Canadian could go on in the Bundesliga as a youth product and come up and be someone that the MLS can say to youngsters who maybe are considering a career in baseball or American football or basketball, look, you can succeed in soccer as well. And that would mean we don't have future World Cups without the US national team even taking part.
Or Canada. Canada hasn't
been
at the World Cup since 1986. And Davis, of course, he gave a speech at the opening congress of the World Cup in Russia about the tournament going to North America in 2026. So Davis spoke. Davis gave a really good speech. It's online. You can look it up, about the importance of the tournament coming back to North America for young kids like himself, and how as a refugee he came to North America seeking hope, and how he's now delighted that he's probably going to be able to represent his country, Canada, at this stage. And I think you mentioned the changing and the change that is happening in North America. It's quite interesting, and I think Davis could be very much the face of that.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. Now let's look at some players that are ones to watch, upcoming players. There's one that we were chatting about off air before we started, called a guy I don't really know too much about, Michael Cousins. Again, I hope I've pronounced that right. All I know from reading about him online is he's from Strasbourg, which I always forget if it's in France or Germany, but I think it's France.
Yeah, it's definitely France. Don't confuse that one. We don't want to open up old wounds. Chris, that is a player we liked a lot last year already. Cousins, he was fantastic at times, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. That's what I spoke to Hal about before the show started, before we started recording. He's very, very good at spotting a through ball. He's got a lot of speed. He reminds me of a player who should be about 10 years older. He's got a lot of thought to his game. He does a lot of not overthinking, but he thinks a lot, and that's something that I think for such a young age. I mean, don't forget he's only 18. He's certainly someone who will be in and around the French national side now for probably the next European championships. So it's going to be good. I mean, I saw him play in the back end of I think, Manu, it was when I was over at Gladbach for that game where I just about got home in a snow drift. Just about got back to Wuppertal where I was staying, and he played very well that day. And yeah, I'm hoping he's going to get a lot more game time this season and be critical in that midfield area for Gladbach, because they need a player who can sort of control that central midfield area, and they didn't seem to have that at times last season, which is why, unfortunately, when you watched Borussia Mönchengladbach play, you didn't know who you're going to see, because one day they could be fantastic, and then weekend after they could be absolutely dreadful. But if they can sort of get him playing a lot more, he was on the bench a few times last season. He had a slight ankle problem at one point, but he only played bit parts, 11 minutes against Schalke. He played 60 minutes against Wolfsburg. I'd like to see him play a lot more, 90 minutes. I think this season could be a bit of a standout breakout season for him. But if you've anyone listening's not seen him play, definitely when Gladbach are playing, keep your eye on Cousins, because I think he's going to be one for the future.
Yeah, you mentioned Borussia Mönchengladbach with good reason, of course, who we're speaking about, but they actually have lost Yannick Vestergaard, who's gone to Southampton. So now I'll get to see a bit more of him. But they need now, of course, to replace that key centre-back. And I'm just wondering if either of you are hearing any rumours about who they might be potentially signing.
Yeah, they're definitely looking. On the other hand, in Elvedi, someone who played out wide, they already have a centre-back that can fulfill that role. And I think that's the reason why Gladbach ended up selling Vestergaard, because they were quite confident that they had enough depth in that position to deal with his departure, right? And then move in other players from other positions to play there. Now, that said, I think there's always a chance, right, that you're going to bring in another centre back. And what I'm hearing is they're looking at Barcelona's Marlon, Brazilian, 22-year-old Brazilian, who could come in either on a loan deal or a permanent transfer. But you have to remember that money that they got for Vestergaard was spent on Alassane Pléa, the striker from Nice. Yeah. Very good player. We have a scouting report up on him because one of the people on the Football Grad network is Thomas Verins, who watches Ligue 1 almost religiously and used to work as a scout for Carlton. And he every once in a while provides us with really good scouting articles. So there's a scout article up on Alassane Pléa on Fußballstadt.com. So a lot of the money went into that striker. They paid quite a lot of money for him. So I think any kind of center back that they're going to bring in now will be maybe someone on loan or someone young that they can develop.
Yeah, that's always what you hope for as a fan. And I'm a fan of a computer game. It's called Football Manager. There'll be people that know about it, and I waste far too much of my life, just ask my wife, playing that. In fact, I don't even know if she still lives in the house. But there's a player on there whose name I always look for, and it's Havertz, Kai Havertz of Bayer Leverkusen. Anyone who plays Football Manager will know this is a wonder kid, and someone who is very luckily in real life actually lives up to the hype. And I'm hearing he's definitely someone that this season will probably be a breakout season for the attacking midfielder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Chris, this is a guy that's probably going to feature in the national team now, right? With the changes that are happening at the DFB.
And also, Bayer Leverkusen have done very well to keep hold of him because he's had 3 or 4 Premier League sides sniffing around him as well.
And Leverkusen are going to be the team to watch. I'm going to throw in a crazy prediction again. They're going to fight for the title.
You said that last season.
I'm going to throw in Hannover 96 as a team to watch. There's a bit of a recurring theme here, and that's what I'm sticking to. Guys, before we close, is there any other players to watch ahead of the new season that you'd like to bring our attention to? Chris, have you got anyone up your sleeve?
Well, he's not up my sleeve, but he's not too far away from where I originate from, and that's Lookman at Everton, who there's a lot of traction for him moving to Leipzig at the moment. I don't think it's any secret that RB Leipzig won him back. Obviously, he was on loan there last season for a part of it. They won him back so much that they've not taken his name off the locker at Kotterweg, which is Leipzig's training ground. Leipzig players have been asking him, and this isn't my phrase, by the way. This is a phrase that is on Instagram. Where you at, bro? And the picture of his locker. So Leipzig players want him back. He himself wants to go back. He's not travelled to Portugal for Everton's training camp because he has a slight injury, a little like Felipe Coutinho had an injury before he went to Barcelona. And the word from both Merseyside and from Germany is that it will be agreed this week for around about 20 million euros.
Which would be almost double what Everton paid for him, because as you know, Chris, my sort of bread and butter is lower league English football, and I actually saw him score his first goal for Charlton Athletic when they lost 3-2 to Brighton and Hove Albion, and I think it was December 2015. And then, of course, he went for that big money move to Everton. It was around about 8 million, 11 million, something like that. And now he's going to get this move, which I think he deserves because he hasn't been utilised correctly at Everton. And I think he'll go on to not only be a superstar, but actually I think he'll go on and help his national team when we win the Euros and the World Cup.
I think, to be honest, I think you're quite right there. And speaking to some people in and around Everton themselves, Lookman is not happy to stay. He wasn't happy with his treatment, first of all, by Ronald Koeman, and then most definitely he wasn't impressed when Sam Allardyce came in, which is why he looked for a loan pretty much straight away, and he got it at Leipzig, and he settled into Leipzig. He can see the way they play football. He can see the way it suits him. I mean, Manu, you and I were in the Olympiastadion for his final game against Hertha Berlin, where he was my man of the match, and I think he was just out-pipped as your man of the match because he came off a little earlier. But he's been fantastic, Lookman has, and it's all looking now that he will be moving to Germany probably this week.
Well, it'd be fascinating to see. There's so much to look forward to. Won't we be Borussia München glad that football's back?
Yes, and a pun, a famous Hal Stewart pun.
I had to have one just for you, Chris. I'll try and get some more in, of course, if you guys will ever have me back. Manu, anything finally from you, sir?
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, we're probably going to be back on our regular schedule now for this podcast and all the other podcasts that we're going to do this season. There's going to be some changes, but Football Grad should be back up and running pretty soon as well. And articles are coming back on fußballstadt.com. I know, Chris, you're on a couple of stories. I'm on a couple of stories. So yeah, just stay tuned. Follow us at Football Grad Live. I think that's really where the action is.
Yes, thank you very much both. Gegenpressing, the German football podcast from the Football Grad Network. I've been Hal Stewart, and thank you very much for listening. Whether they'll have me back or not, well, that remains to be seen. And wishing you all an exceptionally good weekend and rest of the week.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen, dich abzuholen.
It wouldn't be the holiday season if there wasn't candy, right? Celebrate the holiday season with the Holiday Crush. They've sprinkled candy with a holiday theme and fun-packed challenges every week for 5 whole weeks, finishing on January 4th. The more challenges you complete, the better your chances of unwrapping delicious rewards. So, are you ready to crush the holidays? Play the Holiday Crush now. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.
What's up, folks? Anthony Armstrong here, former NFL receiver and host of Believe in Commanders. And with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league specifically created for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. Make your way over to prizepicks.com/believe and use the code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for a first deposit match up to $100. You must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details. Pick more or pick less. It's that easy. Prize Picks.